Social media always seemed like something insignificant to me. I saw other people immersed in them, spending hours looking at photos, liking and commenting, but for me it was just a way to share a few pictures or watch the news. I never thought that likes or comments could have real meaning, until I saw how they changed my life. My marriage to Melanie seemed normal and stable. We had been together for 8 years, and although the passion of the early days had long since faded, I thought we were doing well. We had our rituals, our habits, Sunday walks, dinners at home, trips together. But in recent months, I noticed that Melanie had become distant. At first, I chalked it up to her busy schedule. A new project at work was taking up a lot of time, and she was often staying late or working late at home. She has always been ambitious and loved challenges, so I didn't ask too many questions. But then little things started to appear that made me think. Melanie started spending a lot more time on her phone. She had always been active on social media, but now it was almost constant. She scrolled through her feed during breakfast, checked her phone before going to bed, and even when we were sitting next to each other watching a movie. Her smiles when she looked at the screen became more noticeable. At first, I didn't pay much attention to it. I thought it was just a way to relax after work. That all changed when I accidentally saw her like a photo of a man. His face looked familiar, but I couldn't remember where I had seen him. I decided to check his profile. It was public, and I had no trouble finding more information. It was Owen, a former colleague of hers. His feed was full of photos from traveling, parties, and sporting events. And under almost every post I saw a like from Melanie. Some of the photos were from the same events she mentioned in conversations about work meetings or evenings with friends. They looked like ordinary pictures, but the tone of the comments and the way they communicated left no room for doubt. I began to recall details that had previously seemed unimportant to me. Melanie had talked about him several times when she worked at that company. She mentioned that he was very charismatic, that everyone loved him. I didn't attach any importance to it at the time, but now these words sounded completely different. I felt a suspicion arise in me. Something was not right. Over the next few days, I began to observe her behavior more closely. I noticed how she checked her phone every time she received a notification, how she sometimes smiled to herself while reading something on the screen. She started staying late at work more often, explaining it by deadlines. Her tone in conversations became more distant. But what bothered me the most was the way she hid her phone whenever I was around. One day, when she left her phone unattended, I decided to check it. I knew it was wrong, but the feeling that something was hidden was too strong. What I found made me hold my breath. Owen was in her message list. Their correspondence looked innocent if you read it superficially, but the tone and content of some of the messages left no doubt. They weren't just sharing thoughts about work. There were joking comments, flirting, and references to their meetings. It was not what I expected to see. I started digging deeper. I found photos on her phone that she hadn't posted to her feed. In some of them, she was with Owen. They were sitting too close, laughing, looking too comfortable together. These were photos she had probably deleted from other places, but they remained in her phone's memory. My heart sank with each new picture. I could no longer deny the obvious. The next few days were a complete ordeal for me. I tried to act as if nothing had happened, but a storm was raging inside me. It was hard for me to look at her, hard to talk, hard to be around her. Her every smile seemed fake. Her every word seemed hollow. I was constantly thinking about what to do next. Should I tell her everything right away? Or should I collect more evidence? Is there any point in even trying to understand what's going on between them? Melanie didn't seem to suspect anything. She continued to live her life as if nothing had changed. But I noticed that she was becoming more cautious. She stopped leaving her phone unattended, became less active on social media when she was around me. This only strengthened my suspicions. One day I got my act together and decided to check her laptop. It was a risky move, but I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep well until I knew the truth. What I found was the final confirmation. There were emails from Owen in her inbox. They discussed plans for a meeting, reminisced about their time together. These were not just friendly emails. They were emails from two people in a relationship. I felt anger rising inside me, but at the same time I felt pain. Melanie was the person I trusted the most. How could she do this to me? To us? I couldn't find an answer to this question, no matter how hard I tried. All I knew for sure was that our lives would never be the same again. After I saw all those messages, photos, and letters, there was no more doubt. The truth that I had tried to ignore was now obvious. Melanie was having an affair with Owen. I was filled with anger, pain, and despair, but I realized that this was not enough to make a decision. I had to think about how to proceed, how not to destroy everything at once. Over the next few days, I tried to keep myself together. It looked like nothing had happened. I behaved as I always did, but every time we were alone, I felt like she could sense everything. I observed her behavior even more closely. Melanie became more cautious, as if she sensed that I was suspicious. Her phone was always with her, even during dinner or before bed. She started spending more time out of the house, citing new work assignments. One evening, I decided to collect my thoughts. I went to the park, where I often walked, to find some clarity in this situation. As I sat on a bench, I felt the weight of the last few days pressing down on my shoulders. I asked myself what to do next. Should I say everything I know right away? Or should I continue to observe and gather more evidence? But the main question was different. Am I ready to forgive her? Is it possible to restore the relationship after this? I decided that I needed support. I turned to my best friend. He has always been the person with whom I could share my most difficult thoughts. We met in a cafe, and I told him everything I knew. His reaction was what I expected. He was outraged and advised me to talk to Melanie immediately. But I wasn't ready for that. Something was keeping me from confrontation. The next day, I decided to see a family psychologist. I felt that I needed professional help to understand my feelings and find a way out of this situation. The first session was difficult. I told her about our marriage, how it all started, how it looked from the outside. But when I started talking about the betrayal, my voice trembled. It was harder than I expected. The psychologist listened carefully and asked only one question. What do you want for yourself? This question made me think. I had always thought of us as a couple, as a family. But for the first time, I realized that I had to focus on myself, on my needs and desires. It was a strange realization that gave me the strength to take further steps. Over the next few weeks, I continued to go to therapy. I began to understand my emotions, my anger, and frustration better. I realized that holding on to a grudge is like carrying a heavy stone in your pocket. It prevents you from moving on. But forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or taking it back. It was a way to free myself from this burden. Finally, I made up my mind. One evening when Melanie came home, I decided it was time to have the talk. I prepared myself mentally, thought about what I wanted to say. I wanted to be honest, but not aggressive. When she came into the room, I invited her to sit down. She looked surprised, but she had no idea that this conversation would change everything. I told her that I knew about her relationship with Owen. I told her that I had seen her correspondence, photos, letters. Her face changed instantly. She couldn't find the words to justify herself. Then I asked her why it happened. She admitted that she felt lonely, that she lacked an emotional connection in our marriage. She said she didn't want to hurt me, but she couldn't stop herself. These words were like a blow to me. I felt like something in me was breaking. But at the same time, I realized that I could no longer live in this deception. I told her that we needed to take a break so that we could both realize what we wanted. She agreed, but her eyes were full of despair. I could see that she was sorry, but was it enough to save our marriage? The days after the conversation were the most difficult. We decided to live separately for a while. I moved in with a friend of mine to have space to think. I tried to understand if I could forgive her, if there was a chance to build something new. But with each passing day, I realized that the trust we had built over the years was broken. And although I loved her, I could no longer look at her the way I used to. We decided to break up. It was a difficult decision, but I knew it was the only way forward. The divorce process was painful, but also liberating. I began to feel like I was back in control of my life. I returned to my hobbies, started spending more time with friends, and playing sports. It was like a reboot that gave me the opportunity to find myself anew. This situation was a great lesson for me. I realized that trust is the foundation of any relationship, and it is impossible to move forward without it. I also realized how important it is to be honest with myself and not be afraid to make difficult decisions. It was a hard road, but it led me to a new life where I finally felt free. Divorce was a turning point in my life. After that, I was left alone with my thoughts, emotions, and a new reality. My past was filled with disappointment and pain, but at the same time, I felt relieved. It was a release from deception, lies, and the feeling that I was living in a false world. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could start from scratch. The first months after the divorce were the most difficult. I moved to a new house, small but cozy. It became a symbol of a new beginning for me. I tried to make this space my own, surrounding myself with things that brought me joy. I decided to remove old photos related to Melanie. Their place was taken by books, posters of my favorite movies, and a few plants I bought at a local shop. I knew that change had to start from within, so I continued to visit my psychologist. We talked about my feelings of guilt, how the betrayal affected my self-esteem and trust in others. She helped me realize that all these emotions are a normal part of the healing process. The hardest thing for me was to forgive myself for not noticing the signs of betrayal earlier. I kept asking myself, could I have changed anything? Could this situation have developed differently? But over time, I realized that this path was inevitable. I decided to focus on my physical and emotional health. I joined a gym and started training regularly. Sport has become not only a way for me to stay in shape, but also a way to deal with stress. Running on a treadmill, heavy workouts with dumbbells, all this helped me get rid of the tension that accumulated during the day. After each workout, I felt stronger and more confident. I also returned to my hobbies, which I had previously put off due to lack of time. Photography, which was once just a hobby, became a way for me to express my emotions. I started taking pictures of nature, cityscapes, and even strangers. Each shot told its own story. This process helped me to see the beauty in everyday life, even in the smallest details. My social life also began to gradually recover. I began to communicate more with old friends who supported me throughout this period. They always reminded me that I was not alone, even in the darkest times. We spent our evenings playing board games, going to the movies, or just meeting in a cafe to talk. Their support was invaluable to me. However, the biggest challenge was to open my heart again. For a long time, I felt that I was not ready for a new relationship. The trust that Melanie had broken left a deep mark. But life had its own plans. One day, I met a woman at a photography exhibition. Her name was Kate, and she was a professional artist. Our acquaintance was accidental, but very natural. We started talking about art, about her paintings and my photographs. Her view of the world was so fresh and unusual that I immediately felt my heart opening. Our relationship developed gradually. Kate was patient and understanding. She knew I was going through a difficult period and never rushed things. We spent a lot of time together discussing art, life, and dreams. She helped me realize that betrayal does not define me as a person, that I deserve happiness and love. With Kate, I felt what trust was again. She was honest, open, and sincere. Together, we built new memories and created traditions. Once she suggested that we go to the sea to relax and just enjoy life. This trip became a symbol of a new beginning for me. We walked along the shore, took pictures against the sunset, sat around the campfire, and talked about everything. I realized that I had found myself again, but now in a new light. I also began to devote more time to charity. Melanie's betrayal taught me the value of honesty and support, so I decided to help those going through difficult times. I started volunteering at a psychological help center where I talked to people who were facing betrayal, divorce, or loss. Their stories were different, but I saw in them a reflection of my own journey. I shared my experience, supported them, and showed them that even after the darkest moments of life, you can find light. Gradually, I realized that forgiveness is the best gift I can give myself. I forgave Melanie. This did not mean that I had forgotten everything that had happened or that our relationship could be restored, but it did free me from the resentment that had held me captive for a long time. I began to see the past as a part of my history, but not as a determining factor in my future. A few years after my divorce, I stood on a stage, speaking to a group of people who had come to hear me give a lecture on overcoming difficulties. I spoke about my journey, about betrayal, pain, and recovery. There were dozens of people in the audience, and I could see the understanding in their eyes. It was the moment when I realized that my life, even with all its difficulties, had meaning. My experience could inspire others. Now I look at my life with gratitude. I have a loved one by my side, a job I love, friends, and the opportunity to help others. My heart is open to everything new that life can bring me. And if there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's that every crisis is a chance for growth, and every end is an opportunity for a new beginning. After the divorce, my life turned into an uncharted space. I left behind everything that was familiar and comfortable to start over. It was a difficult but necessary step. My decision to divorce Melanie was not an impulsive one. I had been thinking about it for weeks, if not months. But even when I knew it was the right thing to do, it didn't ease the emotional burden. At first, I didn't know how to organize my new life. I moved to a small apartment in a different part of the city, away from our old house filled with memories. The place was simple, even minimalist, but that's exactly what I needed. I wanted to start from scratch, without any reminders of the past. The first days were hard. I would wake up to silence that seemed oppressive. In our old house, there was always a commotion, calls, conversations, laughter. Here it was so quiet that I could hear my breathing. But I needed this silence to understand myself. I started with simple things. I decided that I had to create a new routine for myself. Every morning I went for a run in the nearest park. It became not only a physical outlet, but also a way to calm my thoughts. I ran, listened to music, watched people, and felt the pain slowly go away. Over time, these morning runs became a kind of meditation for me. In addition to physical activity, I started paying more attention to my hobbies. Photography, which used to be just a hobby, now became my way of communicating with the world. I would take my camera and go explore the city. Each picture was a kind of attempt to capture the moment, to find beauty in the ordinary. It gave me the feeling that life goes on, even after all the turmoil. Friends became an integral part of my recovery process. I began to communicate more with people I had previously underestimated. They supported me, listened to my experiences, and, most importantly, reminded me that I was not alone. They helped me to understand that betrayal is not my fault, but the choice of another person. Over time, I began to devote more time to my work. It became my outlet, a way to escape from personal problems. I took on new projects and tried to develop professionally. This allowed me not only to keep myself busy, but also to see my strengths. I realized that even in the most difficult situations, I could find the strength to move on. One day, while looking through my old notes, I came across a list of goals I had once made. Many of them remained unrealized due to lack of time or desire. Now I felt that the time had come. I've always dreamed of traveling to Europe, but I've never dared to do it. Now I decided it was time to change that. I booked my tickets and set off on a journey that became a real reboot for me. Traveling gave me a new perspective on life. I met people from different cultures, listened to their stories, and shared my own. Every conversation, every new place reminded me that life is not only about pain and loss, but also about the joy of discovery and new opportunities. I took photos that became my personal diary. They reminded me that even in the darkest times there is a place for beauty. When I returned home, I felt that I was different. I was no longer afraid of loneliness, no longer clinging to the past. I realized that my path was not to escape from problems, but to accept them and move forward. I started working on myself, reading more books, attending seminars, developing as a person. This gave me a sense of integrity and inner peace. A few months after the divorce, I met Elizabeth. It was a chance meeting in a bookstore that turned into a long conversation over coffee. She was interesting, cheerful, and open. We started talking, and over time our acquaintance grew into something more. Elizabeth knew about my past and accepted me for who I was. She didn't try to change me or fill a void. She was just there for me, and that was enough. Our relationship developed slowly but surely. We traveled together, shared dreams, and supported each other. With Elizabeth, I felt for the first time in a long time that I could be happy. She reminded me that life goes on, that after losses there are new opportunities for love and joy. Looking back, I can see how far I have come. My path to recovery was not easy, but every step was important. I learned to trust myself, believe in my strength, and appreciate what I have. The betrayal that once seemed to be the end of everything became the beginning of a new chapter in my life. And now I know for sure that even after the darkest moments, you can find the light. The last years of my life have proven that even the deepest losses and disappointments can lead to something beautiful. I would never have imagined that a story that began with pain and betrayal would turn into a path to true happiness, harmony, and inspiration. But now I realize that all the trials I have faced were necessary for me to become who I am today. Our house by the lake, surrounded by a pine forest, has become a real center of our family. This is where Elizabeth and I spend most of our time. Every day brings its own joys and challenges, but most importantly, we overcome them together. Our daughter, who was born 2 years ago, has filled our home with even more warmth. Her laughter, first steps, and first words have become a reminder of how important moments of simple happiness are. My eldest daughter from a previous marriage, who at first had a hard time accepting the changes in our family, now feels like a full-fledged part of the new life. We talked a lot with her about what had happened, and I explained that even after the divorce, her mother and I loved her equally. Elizabeth was able to find an approach to her, and now they have their own little rituals, walking together, culinary experiments in the kitchen, and evening conversations. It was difficult, but it was worth it. After the exhibition of my photographs and the speeches I gave to inspire others, I came up with the idea to create a project to help people going through difficult life stages. Together with Elizabeth, we founded a small organization that runs art therapy courses and workshops for people facing crises. It became not only a way to help, but also another way to strengthen our family. We work on the project together, and it gives us incredible pleasure. I also continue to do photography, but now it's more than just a hobby. My name has become known in certain circles, and I receive invitations to international exhibitions. My works reflect not only nature or people, but also the emotions I experienced in different periods of my life. They have become a kind of diary that I share with the world. And each exhibition is a new opportunity to talk to people, hear their stories, and inspire change. One of my biggest achievements was writing a book. In it, I described my journey in detail, from the moment I found out about the betrayal to the present day. I shared not only my experiences, but also advice for those who are going through similar things. The book became a bestseller in its genre, and I received hundreds of letters from readers thanking me for my inspiration and support. It was another proof that even the most painful moments of life can become a source of strength. Elizabeth has always been there for me. She supported me in everything, even when I doubted my abilities. She became the person who showed me that love can be simple and real, without pressure or demands. We decided that our main goal was to live in harmony with ourselves and the world, to appreciate every moment, and to help others find their way. One evening, sitting on our terrace by the lake, I thought about how far I had come. The past no longer seemed like a burden to me. It had become part of my journey that had led me to this moment. I realized that every loss, every mistake, and every pain were important lessons that made me stronger. Today I look at my life with gratitude. I have a family that I love, a job that I enjoy, and a purpose that inspires me. And although the path to this point was not easy, I do not regret any of the steps, because they have led me to who I am. If there is one thing I can say to those who are going through a difficult period, it is this: don't be afraid of change. They may be painful, but they open the door to a new life. Embrace them, move forward, and remember that even after the darkest night, there is always a dawn.